Welcome back to the channel, everyone. My name is Joe Buskins and this is our family's boat shop, and today we are in episode 6 of our project boat rebuild. We are still working on the console. Now in episode 5 we did a bunch of stress crack repairs. We had some bad stress cracks around the corners here, along with in previous episodes we filled a bunch of speaker holes and old screw holes. We're making this thing like brand new. We've got a table full of products we're going to be using. We got an assortment of sandpaper, everything from 220 up to 1200. We've got some air tools, power tools, and some assorted sanding blocks and other tools to help wet sand this thing out and bring it to a shine. Now the object of this whole series is to bring a boat back from the grave, really. It's going to need stringers, transom floors. The console was kind of a mess in itself, but we're going to tackle it first. And we've got gel coat that's been applied, but it needs to be finished or polished. So I thought it would be natural to move forward with showing you folks how, if you were at home and you had done the structural repair, which we used some good vinyl ester resin and some quality gel coat to get that done. But now we're moving on to a product y'all have probably seen me use previously, and that is the 3M Dry Guide Coat. And what it does is it allows you to see where you have sanded previously. Now, we probably are going to just run through this fairly fast because we do have some other videos here on the channel that go very into depth. But what this dry guide coat does, it allows you to show where your repair area is and where you've sanded and where you have not. So as you move through the progressive grits of 220, 400, 600, 800, 1200, you know that you have in fact covered the area thoroughly. Now I want to show you another little trick of the trade. Standard Dawn dishwashing detergent and a Zep sprayer from our local Lowe's. And one thing that we found that really helps when you are going to be doing some wet sanding is just a couple of drops of dishwashing detergent. I like Dawn just because it's been around forever and just a good product. But what that does is it helps break the surface tension and clean the sandpaper as we are wet sanding. Now, we're going to be moving into wet sanding, but sometimes what we'll do initially, we may start with some 220, and I know a lot of you folks at home may just start with some little electric tools. This is a variable speed DeWalt, which we will be putting video links below all of our videos descriptions for the tools that we're using, the sandpaper and different products. But you could certainly use a little electric here, and y'all will notice I'm using a 6-inch disc on a 5-inch pad. But what that does is it'll allow you to get slow that way down. You see how quickly you can do an initial knockdown in the corners there. Now another little trick a lot of people don't know that you can do is you can take a round pad and put it on one of the square DeWalt sanders, and that also kind of gives you that nice radius corner there. Now this is like 80 grit paper, so I'm not going to use it, but you can see how that corner of that little pad could get right up in those corners and help put a nice radius. Now one thing I would think anybody out there could use and have is some sanding blocks. So even if you don't have the money for an electric tool or a pneumatic, you can take something like a block of wood, and I've got an assortment of different length blocks that we have made over the years for different assorted situations. But this particular one was actually from a piece of ATC core sail. This is a 6-pound density foam core, what we used when we were building our hardtop for our 29 there in the background. And I just cut a nice little straight piece of it and then used a small palm router with, I believe that is a 1/2-inch radius on there. And you can actually I just used it to put a beautiful little radius. Now obviously I did it on all sides, but if you have a little palm router, you could just put a nice radius on a piece of wood, a piece of foam, and you could kind of match the sanding surface. Another option would be to use a little 3M foam blocks there. That's going to be in 400 grit, but you got the Velcro. And again, you can use the round pads to kind of help work down into the corners there. So I'm going to start with the DA though. This is kind of our go-to. If you ever get to where you are doing this a little more often, this is a Hutchins. I've had that air tool for going on 25 years now. Probably one of the best air tools ever made. Fantastic company. This tool has hundreds of hours on it. Now you can already see where the guide coat is showing us where there are highs and there are lows. I'm going to get a little bit of this water on everything. Now, important to note, you don't really want to use water when you're using electric tools. Obviously, there's a shocking hazard. So pneumatics only when we're wet sanding could be dangerous otherwise. And we're just going to do an initial pass there. You can see how quickly we see material going away there. Wet sanding keeps the dust down. When I'm standing with the initial cut, the 220, not trying to spend much time down in the corners there. If you're not careful, you'll dig a groove in the corners, and that is not that is a bad thing, not a good thing at all. Just gonna get little progress made, but we are not trying to go all the way. You can see we've already made a lot of progress there. Now I'm going to try to move this through this particular video. I'm going to rinse the disc off there as well. That way it'll be good and clean. That is one of the really cool things about using a Velcro versus a sticky back though, is you can reuse that disc. So I can use it as much as I want. I can set it off to the side. If I want to put a 400 grit on there or a different grit, I can. And then if we start sanding in another area, I can go back to the 200. Got some 400 grit. This is the foam block like we showed how you can make just a moment ago. And again, you can just wrap the block there. A little more water. And now with this radius corner, I can kind of get down in that corner a little more without fear of digging a groove. Now the block is going to go a lot slower, but that's a good thing. Sorry about the siren in the background, y'all. I'm sure they're not coming after me. It just occasionally happens while you're out here videoing. Sorry about that. Real world circumstances. Wish I had $1 million studio, but I do not. Just part of life. I live in a pretty crime-free area for the most part, but we have a lot of emergency services down here. People sometimes come down to the beach on vacation and act silly and never know what they might get into. But I'm kind of just doing a multi-directional here. You don't want to spend too much time in any one spot. I had mentioned when I was making this video that this is a fairly complex shape. You've got an inside corner going around a large radius there. I'm going to clean that dust off once again, and I'm going to spend a little time out here on this flange. And again, you would not want a hard cornered block. This is more or less the same radius as the inside corner there. you can see the guide coat showing me exactly where it's low, where it's high. The dark spots are going to be the low areas. We're making progress. Don't expect it to be super fast. It'll get there. Again, just moving around. We're not staying in one spot for a long duration. Don't expect to get all of it in the first phase of sanding either. Want to thank everybody that's been tuning into the channel. You guys are awesome. We've been getting watchers and viewers from all over the world. Pretty amazing for a guy like me from a small town on the Gulf Coast. Have people from Australia and the UK, and had a comment from Romania today. So welcome to the channel, everybody, and thank you. All right, here we go. You can see there's a little bit of a low spot right there. Now we do plan to gel coat the whole entire console, but obviously most of you folks at home are probably just fixing some stress cracks and you're not going to be gel coating the whole boat. But if I were to go through this or sand a little too aggressively, we're going to be putting more on anyway. But at home, you would want to use caution, and that's where the guide coat, you can see again, we got some lows right there on that outside. I'm just going to kind of come from different angles. We'll do diagonally. Now is also a good time to ask you folks, if you are enjoying the content that me and my family are working hard to produce, feel free to hit that subscribe button, like, comment, share, tell a friend. We look at our stats and it's amazing how many folks are watching that aren't subscribed to the channel. And when you subscribe, that tells YouTube that you like what you're seeing, and they may recommend the channel to more people. The more people that watch, the more of these videos we can kind of make and do for you folks at home. There we go, a little bit more. Now I generally go pretty far with the 400. When you move to 600, some folks will actually even polish at 600. And if you have a boat that's kind of more of a utility boat or a work boat, you may be totally fine. Again, you can see there's a bit of a low spot there. But you don't want to just focus on one low spot too much. I'm going to move back around this side. You can make a surprising amount of progress in a relatively short amount of time. Also a good workout. I'm telling you, man, doing this kind of work keep you in good shape. See here, we're going to go from one side to the other, nice and easy. Just be sure not to put too much pressure on edges and corners, or you will sand through. Now, one thing to remember for new folks out there doing this, even if you want to get it perfect or hope to get it perfect on your first try, there's going to be a learning curve to this, and don't let it throw you off. If for some reason you put some gel coat on here and you do sand through, let the water dry, scuff it up. You can always put some more gel coat on and approach it again. And I guarantee you, every time you do this, you're gonna get better at it. You're gonna learn, you're gonna dial it in. The first time probably won't be perfect. Even myself, I've been doing this my entire lifetime. Grew up in a boat shop. My father was a boat builder and a boat repairman. And occasionally we will have little mistakes that happen, and that's just part of being human. Don't let it stop you from trying to do this. Now, there are all different kinds of jobs you can tackle. Obviously, this one is a complete restoration. It's a pretty big area. If you were working on a smaller area, I would recommend probably starting with like a smaller repair, like around where these fastener holes went. They're going to be less complicated. Sometimes people get a project boat and they want to go after the biggest, most obvious thing first, but doing a little bit of practice, working on some smaller areas is going to give you some experience. Here again, you can see how nice that radius corner flowing right down in there. That's actually starting to shape up quite nice. And again, the guide coat is really showing me what we've got. Now, one thing you may want to consider, and I kind of jumped into this a little bit without some gloves, and we do this kind of work all the time. Your hands get pretty resilient and pretty tough, but if you don't do this all the time and you're doing a lot of wet sanding, you will find you can actually sand your fingertips, your fingerprints off. Basically, if you're not used to it, the wet sanding paper will sand your fingertips. So some latex gloves, and obviously put your gloves on when your hands are dry. That'd be much easier. Even for a guy like me, sometimes when we sand a bunch, especially after a couple days, you're like, man, why are my fingertips so tender? And you'll realize, yeah, that works much better. Dry hands versus wet hands. That will keep you from sanding through your fingertips. That can kind of be one of those things. Another thing folks want to be aware of when working with fiberglass, it seems pretty obvious to me, but fiberglass can produce splinters just like wood can, or lumber. So you will never see me taking my hand and rubbing it across surfaces where we've done fiberglass work where there's raw fiberglass. You may see me touch a surface, or if it's pure gel coat, it's okay, but you do not want to rub your hand back and forth over raw fiberglass, or you are likely to get some splinters from that. You see, we're going pretty far with the 400. Obviously, this console has some more areas to repair, and if we were not videoing this, we would have went ahead and probably just filled everything, you know, the whole boat, the whole console, and then came around and done all of our wet sanding. But for the sake of videoing and showing you folks at home, again, these corners kind of diagonally up and down. You can see the guide coat is showing us there's a little low spot right there. Otherwise would be very, y'all notice how nice our sandpaper is holding up. Little bit of soap and a spray bottle is gonna do the job. Very good. I do enjoy hearing the comments from you folks, like what kind of boats you're working on and what part of the world you are watching from. Again, for a guy like me from a small town in the southeast, it's pretty cool to be communicating with people from all over the world. It's so neat, and I love to hear about what you guys are fixing up. And of course, everyone here in the States, don't want to leave our locals out for sure. Kind of go from one side to the other now. The goal is to continue to move. You don't want to sand a groove in just one spot or place. Sand at different angles, sometimes a little diagonally. And again, we don't expect to get this absolutely perfect because we are going to be painting this whole console, or gel coating it rather. There you go. That's looking pretty good. Very nice, not too shabby. And again, if you were to take some acetone and wipe off that, there's little lows are not, they are not terribly bad, but that is where the guide coat really comes in And a block, now if you were to take just the sandpaper by hand and hand sand it like so, a lot of times you'll end up with little grooves like where your fingers are. So it's not typically something I recommend. You may remove material, but you're not going to get what we call a fair or true surface. So that's really where the block comes in. And again, if you don't feel comfortable making your own blocks, which again, I think everybody can do it, you can use, there's some more 400 on these little 3M. And again, everybody, I will put some links below the video's description for all the products we use. That does help support the channel, and we appreciate it so much. Now, by changing to a different block here, this one's a little bit wider, a little different profile, you get a little different action on the surface there. And what I'm doing, I'm not dragging the corner of this into the corner much at all, but I'm kind of coming just down diagonally from the top to the bottom. You're trying to hold this block nice and flat. Nice and uniform. The 3M guide coat, one container of that, it's not terribly cheap, but it will last a very, very long time. Like, it goes a long way, and it doesn't go bad. So it's not like some of the chemicals or paints you might use that have a short shelf life. So the guide coat can last. Now I'm gonna kind of come in from the outside, and I'm gonna do a little orbital sanding here. So I'm not necessarily in line, but I'm changing it up again. Little different action here, and constantly moving. The trick is to not just stay in one spot and try to get one spot perfect. You're trying to get everything down kind of at the same level at the same time. Same way here, I can turn it if I wanted to, and you just don't want to put too much pressure on the corners or the edges. That is where people have problems, or at least where I've had problems in the past. Now, I know our videos tend to run long, folks, but my goal is to really teach you folks at home how professionals do this and not give you a false sense of time and effort. You know, it's okay if it takes a few hours to do this. You could save yourself a lot of money. And if you're just looking at this for entertainment and want to educate yourself, there are a lot of guys, folks out there, guys and gals that are in the repair business that are professionals. That's what we do as well. And some of these jobs, if they're in over your head, by all means contact a pro to help you with this. But something like this where it's non-critical, this is above the water line, it's not a structural issue, it's more of a cosmetic thing for sure. A lot of people have older boats, and it's hard to justify spending the kind of money it might take. And I just hate seeing some of these cool older boats go into the landfill. Great little hobby. Fix up an old boat, maybe something that was handed down to you from another family member. Maybe you have a son or daughter, it could be a weekend project, something you work on and fix up a little skiff, spend a little time. Again, you can see there's very subtle low spots without the guide coat. Right there, just little subtle shadowing. Without the guide coat, it would be next to impossible to see that. It would be hard to know when to stop and go on to the next phase. Sandpaper. Typically we start with 220 and just get a rough knockdown, and then 400, 600, 800, 1200. Okay folks, so we have finished off with the 400, washed it down with a little bit of clean water, and I'm going to use a little Wagner there just to throw a little bit of warmth or heat and dry that off. One thing you do not want to do is cook it or overheat it, but you also do not want to try to apply any guide coat on a wet surface. And you'll see there's a couple low spots right there, maybe a couple there. We've definitely made some progress. Another light application, and this time we are moving right on to 600. And again folks, I'm going to try to speed through this, try to really give you the information you need to do this well. That is a time saver though. I know it's not terribly cheap, it's a little bit pricey, but it'll save you a ton of time and frustration. And you'll see professionals using some 600 grit, that's 3M. Good sandpaper, there are good brands. I do find that 3M makes very, very good products. Reloaded a little water bottle there with a little bit of Dawn. And here we go again with 600. Now, if I were gonna be, I do plan on painting this thing. So normally what we would do is probably just leave it at 200, and that would be right for spraying gel coat over. But doing this stuff for you folks at home to show you how, if you were doing a stress crack repair or gel coat repair, you can see how nice that shows you exactly where you have been. And again, so highlighting some of those lows right there. Take my time coming around from one side. This is going to remove the 400 scratches. Which again, don't expect your first attempt at this to be perfect. I have had a lot of experience. My father was a professional boat builder and grew up in the shop as a boy and learned from him. And then my older brother is also a boat builder and repairman. Kind of coming around that corner, maybe a little bit of diagonal. Again, the guide coat showing us where we have some highs and some lows there. And we do have other videos in the channel there, folks, but I don't know that we've done much work on a shape just like this one. This is kind of unique. A flat surface for sure is going to be a little bit easier if you're just learning. Continue to move. Now this is also an example of where the Velcro pads work really good. We can take the 400 right off of that one. We can use it in another application. We can go right to our little 3M block just like that, and you get some more life out of this stuff. Again, sandpaper is another one of those things that doesn't really go bad. It may be a little pricey at first, coming from the outside to the inside, not really putting a lot of pressure on that inside corner there. Now, I always want to tell folks, we're trying to just show folks how things work in our shop and things I've had good success with, and try to stick to things that are kind of tried and true. Now, I know there are some professionals out there. There might be some guys that do this for a living, or maybe there are people that have found methods and techniques that might translate. Say, for example, if you've ever done any auto body, I've had a number of comments here lately that guys that are used to working with automotive, and they're like, man, I thought maybe working with gel coat or boats was going to be radically different. But you can actually find that a lot of the skill sets you may have from those trades carry over really, really well. I want folks to know sometimes you will see me try multiple methods. There's not just one way to get this done, folks. I mean, we try to show you a tried and true and repeatable method if you're new to this. But if you're a pro and you've got something you like to do, by all means, don't feel like I'm saying this is the only way it can be done or everybody must do it my way. And I hope some folks out there kind of get inspired and maybe make this their own. Again, you can see there's a little bit of low going on right there. Tiny low there, got a little bit of low. And folks, we've kind of got a goal. We are toward the end of October, and for folks that have been following the channel, we've had rapid growth, and I really want to thank everybody. But I would love to try to make it to 75,000. We just got to 60,000. That would mean the channel would have to grow quite a bit between now and the end of the year. But that is a pretty amazing prospect. And we're at a point where we could seriously consider doing a lot more of this kind of content as the channel grows. So if you have any boating communities or any other platforms, folks, that you can share our contact information with, the Fish Bump TV family, we'd love to welcome as many folks as possible. Oh man, that is looking pretty right. Pretty exciting stuff. All right, so I think you folks can kind of see the idea on the 600. I'm probably going to give it a little more effort, maybe go just a little further right in there. Moved right on to 800, wet or dry. We've already applied another pass of the guide coat here. I think you folks maybe are seeing a little bit of a a little bit of a system or just a methodology here. We're working our way progressively from coarse to fine. Generally 800. A lot of people stop at 600. Some go to 1200. 800 is not a terribly common sandpaper grit, but I like it. You can see even the guide coat highlights. You can see that's more like what we call crazing gel coat when it gets old. This boat is like 25 years old, and you know, honestly, it's like people's skin. It's exposed to UV light. I've noticed myself, we're out on the water all the time, and man, if you don't cover up, keep some sunblock on, looks like I'm starting to see some of that kind of stuff going on with me. A little bit of cracking and crazing there. So I can sympathize with the poor old gel coat. Poor old gel coat being out there. Again, that's 800. The secret is to move around, and the guide coat is telling me exactly. Matter of fact, you can see right there, it's subtle and you would never see it without the guide coat, but there is a little teeny low spot right there as well. All right, looking pretty amazing there. Video's running pretty long. We may wind this up. Now 1200 would be optional. If it's a darker colored hull, I really like to go to at least 1200. Going back to our radius block here, and just a little more detailing. But for a lot of you folks out there, especially if the boat isn't anything super fancy, kind of more of a utility boat or something that's probably going to get some more scratches and dings in it anyway, you may be totally happy with going to 800. Some homemade blocks, maybe use a little bit of plywood around the yard there. Maybe there's another boat shop you can get in touch with that's got some core material. And what we like to do, now I have another video, if you go back in the channel just a little bit, we have a 3-part video series where we sprayed some gel coat on a panel, we wet sanded it, and then we buffed and polished. And Again, there are lots of good products. Maybe my cameraman can really zoom in there. That's looking pretty darn nice. Maybe one little tiny low spot right there, but again, that's the guide coat working for you. Now, there are several products I really like. Used a lot of the 3M, the marine compound and finishing material. I believe there's a new code for this one, 06044. Again, we will provide a link below the video's description. Meguiar's makes a very good cleaner wax. This is kind of a one-step that will remove oxidation, minor scratches, and wax. Honestly, folks, though, you cannot beat the Colonite heavy duty 885 fleet wax. Amazing wax. You're gonna pay a little bit more for that, but you're gonna get your money's worth. And then when we were building our hardtop mold, we used a lot of the Aqua blue. We've got a fast cut. This is gonna be a more aggressive, and then a buffing and polishing compound that's gonna get you an amazing shine. So everyone, I hope you enjoyed this one. We are gonna be hammering out some awesome videos. We got transom stringers, floors, lots of cool stuff coming in the project boat. Remember to like, subscribe, comment, share, tell a friend. If you wanna stay at home and just binge watch a bunch of our episodes, that is really helpful to the YouTube algorithm. So maybe you can just veg on the couch and watch how we built the console or our 29-footer there in the background. It's Captain Joe here, Fish Bump TV. My son Logan is my amazing cameraman working hard behind the scenes, and we will catch you folks in the next episode.